Okay, welcome back, APUS History. Um, Before we start our lesson today, I just wanted to kind of share with you guys one of my Christmas gifts, actually, that I think all of you might appreciate. Um, so if you check out this T-shirt that I got, I think you guys can definitely relate to it. I can see that people kind of know my taste here. So today, what we're going to be focusing this lecture on is the KansasNebraska Act of 1854, and really kind of the nickname, why it gets the nickname Bleeding Kansas. So we're really going to focus entirely on the KansasNebraska Act today and what becomes known as Bleeding Kansas, because really it is a microcosm for everything that's going wrong in the United States at the time. So if you look here at the screen, we're going to kind of put Kansas and kind of the Kansas and Nebraska territory underneath the magnifying glass here, because if you look at what's going on in this territory, it brings together many of the sectional problems right in one spot, and it really is almost like a mini civil war before the Civil War is fought. So it is kind of a very important event as far as just bringing more tension, but really illustrating just how far we've kind of come apart as the North and the South here. So just one thing I want to point out here: the map is a little bit misleading here. So I couldn't find a map that just had the original Nebraska territory, but in the beginning of this lesson, this Nebraska territory is all of this, including what's called the Kansas territory here. So it's the Kansas and the Nebraska territory. That is all the Nebraska territory in the beginning of our lesson here. Um, so eventually it's going to get split up into the Kansas and the Nebraska territory, but in the beginning it's all the Nebraska territory. Now, if we kind of look here and we focus in, the person who's going to be instrumental in this Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 is going to be an up-and-coming senator from Illinois. So we talked about him a little bit with the Compromise of 1850. So Stephen Douglas, and he gets nicknamed the Little Giant um, because Stephen Douglas, he's a really, pretty short guy, maybe like 5'4", if he's 5'4", if he's that, and he's kind of also known for like his characteristic really big head. So he's a small guy with a big head. So he kind of always makes me think of like a bobblehead doll. But he's a very influential senator and very influential statesman in the United States in the 1850s. And he has a lot to say as far as regards to slavery and the issue of slavery in the territories. Now, Stephen Douglas has a very grand plan. What he wants to do is he wants to have transcontinental railroad built through the Nebraska territory. And this is a dream of a lot of Americans at the time to have a railroad. We go all the way back to the map here, that's going to connect the entire country all the way out to California. So he wants to kind of build this through the Nebraska territory. So the big question is, number one, why does Douglas want to do this? So if you look back at the map, it should be pretty clear to you why he wants to do it. He is a senator from Illinois. And if you look at Illinois here and you look at the railroads, all of the railroads seemingly stop here in Illinois. So the number one reason for why he wants to have a railroad built through the Kansas territory, what's the Nebraska territory at the time, is that he wants to make Chicago the hub, of the trading hub between Western and Eastern trade. And so he wants to do it for his home state. So yes, he wants a transcontinental railroad for the national purposes, for America, for a country, but he's definitely looking out for Chicago, he's looking out for Illinois, he's looking out for his state. And he sees a great future of commerce if they can be kind of this first outpost in the Midwest between the West and the East. So he really wants to kind of get trading going here. So sounds like a good plan, but there's some obstacles to his plan. So the first problem with Douglas's plan, the Nebraska territory at the time, it's not controlled by the United States government. It is Indian territory, which means that they cannot just build a railroad right through it if they want, just because they want to. The Indian territory is considered to be its own sovereign nation within American soil. So they can't just build a railroad just because they want to build a railroad. So that's his first obstacle. Um, so what Douglas is going to do to kind of overcome the obstacle here is he's simply going to, what would you do? Well, he's going to simply negotiate. He's going to use his political skills. He's a great politician, Stephen Douglas. And so what he does is he negotiates with the Indian tribes there, and he's able to kind of basically purchase out the land and split the Nebraska territory into Kansas and Nebraska, and going to kind of open up Kansas to, first for his railroad, but then to white settlement and, either northern or southern settlement here. So he seems like now he's kind of overcome his first obstacle. Now he can kind of get this railroad built. So he proposes this bill in Congress to have the Transcontinental Railroad built, financed by federal money. He runs into a second unforeseen obstacle, though. So the second obstacle that he runs into is that Southerners oppose the railroad. Now, there's two reasons for why the Southerners oppose the railroad. So number one, it's in the north. So like a lot of the railroads, this railroad will run through a northern territory. So what the South is going to say is, well, this disproportionately helps the north. And so they say, well, why not a southern transcontinental railroad where we could transport cotton and products that we make? And so that's one reason why they're upset. It helps the north, and it's going to kind of lead to just more dominance of the north. The second thing here, though, is the location of Kansas. Kansas is located above the 36° 30 north latitude line in the Louisiana Territory. And so what that means, based off of what we've already learned, is that Kansas, when it becomes a state, should come into the Union as a free state. And we've been talking about this constantly, this balance between free states and slave states. And the South is very concerned about this, because this is how they keep their power in the United States government, in the Congress. So they know that Kansas will be coming in as a free state, and they're not willing to accept that. So when Stephen Douglas tries to pass these laws and pass these bills, they're basically going to railroad it, and they're not going to allow this transcontinental railroad to be passed. So now what do you do if you're Stephen Douglas? Well, Stephen Douglas, again, the ultimate politician here, he's going to try and work the system and figure out something that he can get it done so that he can have the railroad that he wants for his state. So this political cartoon kind of sums it up for you here. It kind of puts Stephen Douglas, it paints him as a gladiator, but if you can see, it's kind of tough for you guys, but if you can see on his shield, what it says is popular sovereignty. So what Douglas is going to say to try and get the South on his side so that he can get the railroad built is he's going to say, well, let's make Kansas not follow the rules of the Missouri Compromise. Not just because it's above 36° 30 north latitude should it be free. Well, let's use popular sovereignty. Let's let the people in the state of Kansas decide what they want to do, whether they would like to be a free state or a slave state. So this is the KansasNebraska Act of 1854. So he says, well, let's make Kansas open to popular sovereignty, and let's negate the Missouri Compromise. So this is huge legislation, because it's going to go against 30 years of precedent here of what they've been doing in this acquired Louisiana territory, and they've been doing it for quite some time. So this, surprisingly, is actually going to get passed. But after it gets passed, this is when the real controversy and the real firestorm is going to start. And this is how it gets the nickname Bleeding Kansas. So Kansas is a relatively unpopulated area. It was Indian country for such a long time, so not many people live in Kansas. So both sides, pro-slavery and anti-slavery, see this as a huge opportunity to gain a state for their side. So what ends up happening is people from both sides are going to rush into Kansas to try and influence either in favor of slavery or influence against slavery, and it becomes extremely violent. It's not just that they come in there and they try and influence voting. They're going to be fighting with each other in the streets, riots. It's going to be a very tumultuous situation. Now, the two groups, they're going to get some nicknames here. So basically what happens is that you have one territory, but all these people are kind of rushing in to try and sway it either, for a free state or a slave state, and it's basically going to get two governments there. So two terms that you need to know are free soilers and the border ruffians. So the free soilers are the people who are coming in who are in favor of no slavery. So abolitionists are going to be coming in. Now, the border ruffians, this specifically refers to people from Missouri, because Missouri borders Kansas, and it's a slave state. So they're going to kind of get there first. They're going to kind of rush in and try and sway Kansas towards the slavery camp here. So you're going to have both sides in there. And it gets very bloody, it gets very violent. Now, some examples of this, both sides get pretty militant here. The pro-slavery advocates, they're basically going to surround this city in Lawrence, and they're going to shell it with cannon fire. A war breaks out here. A mini war breaks out here in Kansas. Not that many people die in Lawrence, but it becomes infamous for kind of the attacks that take place here. On the other side, though, you have militant abolitionists. So it's not just pro-slavery people; it's also anti-slavery people here. So famous is going to be John Brown, and so what he does when he goes to Kansas, he hears about this. He's from Connecticut, and he hears about what's going on, and he hears about what happens in Lawrence. And what he does is he goes looking basically for anybody who is a pro-slavery, basically in the pro-slavery camp. And him and a couple of his like followers are going to murder about 6 people in Kansas. So all this violence is really kind of getting out of control here in Kansas. So it filters out into the rest of American society, and pretty incredible stuff here. So this event that they're showing you here in the picture, this is known as the Crime Against Kansas. So you have 2 senators here actually pictured here. So you have Preston Brooks here with the cane, and you have Charles Sumner here. Now Charles Sumner, he's going to go out and he's going to make a very famous speech, infamous speech basically, condemning the KansasNebraska Act, and really making a lot of personal insults against Southerners and Southern senators specifically. So Preston Brooks basically takes offense to this because he's insulted some, older statesmen in the South. And so Sumner one night, he's in the Senate chamber pretty much alone, and Preston Brooks comes in and pretty much beats him near to death with a cane. And so it kind of showed you the violence that is just kind of going on in American society at the time. And to kind of show you the sectionalism, after this, Preston Brooks is kind of seen as a hero in the South. Everywhere that he goes, people are going to give him canes, kind of like as a reminder for like, hey, you did a good job. You stood up for the South. You stood up for our section here. And he can't come back to the Senate for 2 whole years. He's out. So he's, near incapacitated here. And so the conflict here in Kansas, it's bloody, but it's like a precursor to the Civil War here. It has all the same elements, just in a much smaller scale. Okay, now, if you fast forward, the violence kind of tapers off in the late 1850s, but kind of the corruption does not taper off here. So the Lecompton Constitution, this is basically like a falsified constitution that's made up of the pro-slavery delegation here, because both sides are still trying to influence. Kansas has not become a state yet, so they're trying to vote, whether they should allow slavery or should not allow slavery. And so during the Lecompton Constitution and the voting that takes place, like things like, do you live in Kansas? That doesn't matter. They let you vote anyway. There's famous things about, like people just like reading off names from like a telephone book, Cincinnati telephone book, and they vote. People who have been dead end up voting in these elections because, it's basically fixed. So what ends up happening in Kansas is really kind of interesting. After all of this, they basically decide, you know what, we don't want to be a state yet. And they don't become a state until after the